In the podcast today, I am joined by Advaitananda Stoian, Tantric practitioner and teacher for 30 years, and we are here to find out about a new revolution, about the revolution that's called the Erotic Revolution. But first, to see it in a wider context, let's look at the sexual revolution of the 1960s. Advaitananda, why did the sexual revolution have to happen? And what changes did the free love generation make to society in the 1960s?
Yes, hello. It's a very interesting topic, this one. And I'm happy that you start a little bit before this moment, because indeed it was quite a shift that happened in the 60s and 70s, actually, when a group of, at the time, Danish actors were starting to consider that the public needs something more. Actually, they wanted to present intimacy in a totally different manner. And it started in Denmark with some movies like 17, Erik Sonia's 17 by Annelies Meinecke in 1965. Also, there was another production which was called I, a Woman by Meg Alberg in 1965, which was a great international success seen in more than 35 countries, and which was actually also highly criticized by then incoming feminist movements, the feminist movements which were just starting to grow there. It was highly criticized because actually they got it wrong in a certain way. They were trying to go away from this feminine image, the woman as a sexual object, which actually, as we discovered later on, it was inevitable because the approach was wrong. There was nothing wrong with that initiative that these rather wonderful people had at the time, mainstream actors who tried to open up even their personal lives, so to speak, and to show themselves intimately on the screen. And actually their initiative was to bring to the society a completely different vision regarding intimacy. They started to realize that all this very rigid and rather dogmatic approach on a very important chapter of human life, which is intimacy, needed a little bit of a kick in the rare part, so to speak. And this is what they did. They showed it the naked truth. It is true in a little bit maybe innocent way, and they didn't know much about it, but they actually had the courage to try. They have the courage to break the norms. And of course it triggered a very big wave of criticism, but also a very big wave of receptivity. And then it was taken across the border. It was taken by Sweden, and Sweden took the flag afterwards. And in Denmark it was not very much cultivated after that. After 70, 72, they kind of slowed down a little bit. They went almost like reactive to it. There was a lot of criticism, but then the Swedish society took advantage because the whole heat was taken in the first wave by this generation of the Danish producers and actors, and then they took it forward. And what they brought, they practically demolished some of the myths. They demolished some of the taboos around intimacy. Unfortunately, lacking the initiate perspective, they also didn't know what to put instead. Because you see, we always put a taboo there where we empirically know something could go wrong, but we don't know much about that domain. And then we put a fence with a red sign, stop. And that's a taboo. And of course, there is an idea, let's remove the fence, but usually when you do that, for instance, in science, you look first for what do you put instead of the fence? What kind of solid evidence, experience, methodology you put instead when you want to remove the fence. And this is where actually things kind of didn't work further, but there was a merit there. They demolished the fence. The taboos were blown into pieces in some ways. And in the 80s and 90s, that's the reason why we experience, especially in the Western society, a little bit of Puritanist resurgence. Because, of course, when you don't put anything instead of the taboo, it gives argument to the other side to say, see, we were putting a taboo there for a reason. And then that was what we are experiencing actually right now, kind of a coming back of the Puritanism in a certain way.
Is that because the sexual desire or the sexual impulse was something that was not really understood? For example, I think it's true that a naked mannequin in a shop window or a nude painting in a gallery can arouse sexual desire. And the empirical observation is this. The naked mannequin or whatever, the poster or something makes us feel something about it, arousing. Now, because we usually externalize our attention so much, we don't really pay attention what exactly happens with me when I get aroused. Because actually the process of getting aroused is quite complex. And it has even more stages. While in the first part, in the first moments, there is a sexual arousing, which is indeed kind of narrowing our perspective, objectifying the other one, in that case a woman, but also for the men is exactly the same, treating the other one, because of narrowing our consciousness, as a sexual object. So practically we forget about that person being a person. That person is just an object for us, a sexual object. So this is happening indeed in the first moment of some arousing. What was completely oblivious for almost millennia by now is the fact that behind that is hiding what we call today the erotic arousing, which is far superior than the sexual arousement, is awakening the soulful part of the person. Practically you acknowledge the other one as being like you instead of acknowledge the other one as being an object you own. It's exactly the opposite. And in this way you will not blame the naked picture, the poster, because actually there's nothing wrong with it. As long as your eyes see beyond the primordial, primitive, simple, immediate, few seconds sexual arousing, and then you can go beyond in a mode, in a totally different mode, which is called the erotic mode, which is, as I mentioned, far more superior and in a way fulfilling in the most beautiful way. So that's why it appeared such a controversy. And actually this is almost like a deadlock, because on one hand we feel irresistibly attracted by intimacy, by nudity, by eroticism, but actually we end up with some sexual excitement and we feel something is wrong with it. It feels that is disturbing, that is somehow cutting us off from our real potential to growth. It's really blinding us in a very profound way, you can say. And then we try to cut it off, but then we feel attracted with it. That's why it's a deadlock. But then it has a superior solution built in our being, and we just need to rediscover it. So how does love work in this scenario?
That's This is a very long shot. I mean, long and simple in a certain way. It is very interesting here to observe that many couples, and I've been studying this for almost 30 years, and also myself through experimentation, and also making a lot of research with coupled relationships. One thing that you constantly hear from couples which are more open to share and more attentive to what happens in their intimacy is this. They notice that during time, their sexual intimacy start to be almost contradictory to the way the love develops. It's like they are lovely in the rest of the day, and then when they become sexual, something, either the woman or sometimes the man, they say, when they are very honest to themselves, look, yeah, I could do it without, they say. Of course, it's something very nice. It's something that is an urge that comes from inside, release of hormonal tension and all kind of things they call it. So it's almost like a necessary evil, to put it like that. I know it sounds a little radical, but it's like almost like a necessary evil when you hear it from them. So it seems like when you hear such statements that the love experience in the relationship and the sexual experience is as if they almost bounce into each other, they contradict each other, they exclude each other. And statistics are showing, especially on the side of women, for instance, they feel that something is not right. They feel used, objectified as a sexual object, yeah? And then they do it because they love their partner. They do it because they say, fine, but it's just a gesture of love. But it's a gesture of love in sacrifice. And to be very honest, when you tell that to their partner, to their lover, would you accept her sacrifice? They also don't feel good because they say, but I would like to not have it as a sacrifice, but have it as a fulfillment. Again, we have a deadlock there. Love contradicting the sexual intimacy. On the other hand, when the couple discover the superior intimacy, which is the erotic intimacy, there happens something very interesting. They discover that the sexual energy contradicting the love energy, but the erotic energy is supporting the love energy. So erotic intimacy is actually empowering love in the couple, and the love in the couple empower the erotic intimacy. So it's a synergic cooperation, you can say, interaction between the two energies in the dynamic of the couple. And that makes it extraordinary. And to give you an example which everybody can relate to, if you are intimate with a person, and then you start to be very excited, yeah, super excited. Usually sexual excitement, super fast. You are in the mood, let's say. You are in the zone, some people say. And then you get very sexually aroused. And let's say the other one, for whatever reason, says, please, let's stop. Let's say somebody calls, or she just realized, or he just have a unprocessed emotion. It happens, and we need to accept that. And it's severe mistakes people do to swallow that thing, so to speak, and say, okay, I'm not saying it now because he will be very angry, she will be very frustrated. I'm saying this is totally against the dynamics of relationships. We know that. But who does care of that? Okay, so let's say something occurs. When dominated by sexual excitement, in that moment to stop, it's almost traumatic for either of the parts, or even sometimes both. Now, exactly the same situation, super love, nice intimacy, same room, same people, same nudity, but this time in a very high erotic mode. Let's say exactly the same thing appears, some emotion unprocessed, or somebody calls, or you just need to stand up and go because you just remember you left the food in the oven. You know, something happens. The difference is enormous. In the erotic mode, the stopping in every moment will not be that frustrating. Why? Because love and erotic mode, they empower each other, and it will be felt as, yes, sure, why not? That was our erotic experience until it happened. And then you stop and you go something else. You can resume it anytime. While if it was sexual instinct, because it is an instinct behind the sexual excitement, it's almost inevitably to be traumatic. And of course, if the two are very, let's say, civilized or somehow, they will say, fine, it's fine. They will understand it. But it's a very different experience to understand something and to go over a traumatic experience and not having a traumatic experience in the first place. I just wanted to underline the difference between these two, which offers a natural solution.
So if erotic intimacy creates wonderful relationships, how come more people are not practicing it?
Because they don't know about it. Let's take another example. In matters of diet, when I heard 30 plus years ago, that fasting is almost miraculous for regeneration, recovering, and so on. Fasting, just drinking water for 24 hours or 48 hours or so. When I started that, even my parents, who are both scientists, teachers in university, they were scared. They were telling me, no, you risk your health and all that. Now, countless studies are showing the miraculous effect of fasting. You see, so when you're asking, how come not so many people know? Well, how about after thousands of years, we rediscovered fasting? Imagine that. And it was not like a rediscovery from 18th century. It was just a few years ago. It started to revalue the miraculous, very often, effects of it. It's the same with intimacy. It's even less studied openly. So that's why, because we are lacking information, we're lacking education at this level. And let's face it, intimacy education is almost zero today in schools, in universities. People go in life knowing intimacy from porn, which is the massive educative source.
The internet is swamped with confusing information about intimacy, sexual relationships. What can be done about that?
Well, we can study it. We have courses now. We have courses which are explaining gradually to all the details, all these elements about intimacy and eroticism. I personally work on that, and in September or October we will launch a course for people who want to teach other people erotic experience, erotic intimacy. We call it the erotologist course, a course for people who want to train on that. But it's slow, steady pace of growth. My opinion is that people will, when a larger and larger number of people will rediscover this, it will spread quite fast, because intimacy is something we all care about. Even we are shy about, and sometimes we don't talk much about. Everybody has a moment or two of intimacy, or even more. They risk their career with intimacy, let's not forget. Sometimes even an Oval Office sometimes become an erotic place, and so on. So imagine what a force is giving to people, so you can risk such a thing. But then you need to learn how and what to do in intimacy, and it's quite a surprising shift, because this is what you can call it, a shift of perspective. One perspective is the usual, uneducated perspective, sexual perspective, which is coming naturally. You get naked with the person that you like, you get excited, or you see some image, you get excited. That's what we know. And that is the primitive instinct we all know how to trigger, and that is sexuality. And sexuality, of course, has its own, let's say, functions in nature. It's the fail-safe mechanism of nature to make sure we procreate, we make copies of ourselves before we die. But it's just a fail-safe mechanism. Meanwhile, intimacy is meant to provide us with countless amazing benefits. That's why it's so tempting. We're not tempted to make kids. That's a false assumption. Sexuality is empowered by a strong instinct, which is objectifying the other one. That's why people have sex in any conditions. People have sex under bombing. People have sex under disease or whatever, half dead, and still have sex with a nurse or with the whoever is around. I mean, it's like really, it doesn't really matter, because sexual instinct is blinding us to procreate, to mate and procreate. But there is another form of intimacy, the erotic intimacy, which is far superior and is allowing us not to procreate, but to create ourselves, to recreate our perspective, to become superiorly creative, highly productive, and also extraordinarily happy. And that is meant to be. We are even designed. There are a lot of functions in our physiology which we don't understand because we miss the erotic part of our being, of our intimacy. So that's why it's a matter of education, first of all. It's a matter of knowing there is such thing. And from my experience talking about these things, a lot of people are coming and saying, wow, when you were talking about that, I started to realize there is something there I missed. Yes. And once you know it, it's just a matter of experience.
So people can embark on a journey of learning about erotic intimacy. Could you talk about all the benefits that somebody will get if they embark on that course of learning? And also, what are the likely pitfalls or shortcomings that they might have to transcend?
Well, first of all, we need to make a very, very long talk if I mention all the benefits that are deriving from embarking and learning erotic intimacy. So I will mention some directions, and then maybe we develop some of them. Because, first of all, the intimacy that we obtain when we are discovering this much slower, much more profound erotic excitement, which again, it's something that you do purposefully, you build it up purposefully, compared with the very superficial, quick and easy for everyone sexual excitement. You start to experience an intimacy with your beloved to a level that is unprecedented. And I dare to say, this is what teenagers experience sometimes spontaneously without knowing anything before they start the sexual interaction, those charming kisses, caresses, and all these amazing experiences, which they, for the rest of their life, they're longing for. They say, wow, that was such an amazing experience. That was actually, without knowing, their first erotic encounter. Yeah, and then they fall into the sex, and then it becomes attached and heavy and instinctual and aggressive at sides, especially in the case of masculine sexuality, which is leading to a kind of aggressiveness, very defensive in the case of the feminine, and therefore rejecting all that aggressiveness and finding it very hard to cope with and toxic even, and so on. All these things are actually empiric observations. Well, once you choose the other path, you will never know these things. You don't have to deal with that, which gives, as a consequence, profound transformations at the level of the psychology of that person. You know, in a couple, when you experience hours, and I don't exaggerate, hours of orgasmic experience, because there is another here as a parenthesis, once you discover the erotic excitement, you discover something quite astonishing. Erotic excitement doesn't lead, in the case of men, to ejaculation, in the case of women, to explosive orgasm. It leads to multiple orgasmic experience for both lovers. It's natural. It's within that erotic excitement. You shift even your physiology to another mode, unknown by the immense majority of men and very rarely found by the immense majority of women. You just shift on that. And therefore, the dynamics of the experience is to be orgasmic in waves. Well, after a few hours of being orgasmic with each other, the little quarrels, the little tensions that appear inevitably when you grow together in a couple relationship, they're washed away with an efficiency unbelievable. As a result of that, the emotional stability, the love, the trust in the relationship, the growth in the relationship is unprecedented. It's impossible to obtain that otherwise. Moreover, due to the fact that it's leading to a spontaneous retention, in the case of men, of the semen, retention of the energy inside for both of the lovers, it leads to a growth in the vitality, in this regenerative power. It's not a coincidence that before important sport events, before astronauts are sent in space and so on, it's recommended abstinence. Why? Because sexual interaction is depleting the masculine but also the feminine physiology from very important components. Why? Because of the explosive experience, which make it also make the experience very short, not to mention all the other negative experience after the super explosive discharge, ejaculation and explosive discharge. So all this disappearing because of this the rediscovery of the Eros, practically the two lovers have a kind of an amplification of their vitality of the couple relationship and even their regenerative power. They sleep less, they eat less, they look better, their radiance is much, much better spontaneously. They don't even know what's going on there. Also, in time, it leads to, and this is reported by couples which not necessarily like in the beginning of the relationship, because in the beginning everything naturally, spontaneously seemed to be perfect. But couples which were after a few years together, and we know what happens after a few years, it appears this kind of usage of getting used to each other and routines and emotional saturation. It's not anymore the excitement. All these phenomena removed. And moreover, even the freshness, and this is something amazing. Couples that started these things after, let's say, 10 years, they reported that their initial excitement and initial attraction is restored, even though it died before. So after a few years they were together, of course they were nice together, but it was not the flame in the beginning. Then the flame is rekindled by the fact that now they preserve all the energy inside and everything is, let's say, refreshed in this way. So these are, let's say, few little directions that I can mention diagonal, so to speak, in this.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Advaitananda. And what is the revolution aspect of this? How is this going to revolutionize society?
First of all, because of its, I would say, surprising radical transformation of perspective is a revolution. It's more than an evolutionary step. It's revolutionary because we already started and we got so used and entrenched with an intimacy that is so sexually instinctive that this flip of perspective is revolutionary. So that's why we can call it truly revolution. Now, it is also at not only at personal level, but I think it's going to revolutionize society because surprisingly many aspects of human interaction today are biased by the way we have learned intimacy. We have learned intimacy in this way where there is something where you get too close to someone, the trigger of the sexual instinct is too strong, then you have to stay away. We have a lot of protocols of communication in place in order to keep the beast, to keep the beast out of the room, so to speak. And all these things are nothing but a heavy burden on the free human relationships. Now, when we take the animal part out of the picture, not by suppressing it, but by transcending it, by always learning to be way above the animalistic instinct and truly exist in this erotic mode, which is, you can call it a permanent flirtation with life, if you want. And if you go in that mode, permanent flirtation, everything changes. Imagine an office where people are in that mode. They're in a good shape all the time. They have that smile that makes people wonder, hey, who was lucky this morning or last night? But actually, you don't have it because you got lucky. You have it because you are the source of luck, because you are always in that mode. And not because you want something from your colleague, which look gorgeous, by the way, but it's just because you are like that, and you acknowledge the beauty, and you acknowledge the virility, and you are even able to flirt with that without any obligation, because when you are in that mode, you're not racing towards something instinctual. You're just enjoying life as it is. And then in that situation, countless unseen pressures and tensions are released, which is resulting into a completely different kind of behavior between people. Even generally in the society, of completely different kind of relationships and behavior and attitude in life. So that's why it will lead to a completely different view upon pleasure, upon intimacy, and also upon human relationships generally, upon life and how to enjoy life. One of the reasons why today we are almost in a conflict today, because we have on one hand the Puritanists, which are almost saying it's too much, stay, repent a little bit. If you are too happy, it's a little bit too much and all that. And then we have the others who are trying to demolish all limitations possible. And then, of course, we end up with all kind of instinctive reactions and people doing bad things to people and all that, which is feeding the other camp again, and we have this conflictual situation. All this will disappear, because actually you will learn that life is meant for you to be happy and to enjoy it very, very well, consciously, and never trigger any instinctual approach. Also in the way you eat, in the way you sleep, in everything that you are doing with yourself and with your own life, you will be able to do it in a much more detached and harmonious way, enjoyable way, if you learn how to stay above those fail-safe mechanisms without entangle yourself with them and then trying to keep the, as I said, the animal out of the room.
It seems like we are all entangled in subconscious conditioning, and a first step might be beginning to see those tangled knots and to start undoing them. How in your life did you embark upon that?
Yes, it is almost like a relearning process, unless you are very young and you just learn it. I have to say, I was on the very little percentage who started at the time, who started quite young. Basically, when I started it, one of my first intimate experiences already, I was aware of the existence of something. Then I was already attentive, looking for that, and I still could feel the pressure from the surrounding, from my friends and everything that we learned when we were in the end of the high school, beginning of university. Of course, you go to party, you go to have some sex there with some who knows what, all the things that we all know and we don't talk much about. So I've been exposed to that, but then I started to realize, well, there is something more. I started to see that this conflict with certain spiritual aspirations that I have inside. I was starting the meditation, and I could see that when I was getting excited and I wanted to do something very kinky, my meditation was going out the window, So it's like, yeah, I cannot deny the fact that there is a truth in the recommendation to stay away from that if you want to remain calm and peaceful and detached. On the other hand, well, I was just 18, so that was not an option exactly. So yeah, and fortunately, I met my teacher who was actually telling me, no, you don't need to give up either. Because actually the solution is above these two. And I started to learn about it, I started to experience, and it was quite shocking for me when I realized that there is such a simple solution, and yet there were so few people knowing about it. So yeah, it was for me, it was a kind of a natural journey. I started to experience. I had also the opposite experience, just to make it clear. I had few experiences where I went in, like the people around me were doing it, and I could see the difference. I could see clearly that one was splitting me in two, and the other one was pacifying and uniting me. So yeah, and it was much more fulfilling. And then I started to train and to see how can I keep this attitude, this erotic attitude in intimacy, because then the sexual instinct was so strong, especially when you are very young, it's very strong and it takes over in few seconds. But then this was the reason why I trained concentration, and then I could keep the difference. I could keep the wheel and drive safely on the margin of the precipice, but not falling into the precipice, analogically speaking. So yeah, this was for me the journey. And then, of course, after the first experiences where I could have an orgasmic experience without the ejaculatory ending, and this orgasmic experience which is prolonged and lasting, and then bringing to the next one, that was the game change, so to speak. This was like, who wants to go out of that?
So could you perhaps paint a picture of what life might be like in the future if the erotic revolution was spread all over the world? What kind of a life would we have on this planet?
We would have a happy life exactly as it's meant to be. I don't think people would... You see, very often, many of our disharmonious striving, trying to be somebody, which is usually somebody else that we're meant to be, trying to fulfill something, most often something we don't even get happy when we do it in the end. And all these things are coming from a life that is experienced instinctually. And then we try to build something on top of it. And what I've noticed in myself is the fact that you have enough. After you know how to be intimate with at least one person, after you know how to enjoy the presence of a person you love, until your battery, so to speak, your container is full, your reservoir of happiness is to the brink, it's overflowing, you have a totally different attitude in life, in performance, even if you are a leader of a group, you're leading graciously, you're leading with the heart, because you don't need any more ambition, you don't need any more all kind of calculus and agendas and all that. You are equal to yourself, so to speak. So I'm not saying this is very easy, but this is how it is looking like. And then when people are like that, on a general basis. I used to joke to my students, when you are not happy home, you go to invade other people's homes. You go to war. If you are a very happy person home, you go nowhere. You don't need to show other people how to vote, show other people how to produce, I don't know what. You stay to your habitat there because you're happy. Of course, it's a joke, but unfortunately applies so much today. And so the point is that we will shift the fabric of the society, because the fabric of the society is made by us and our relationships. And if that, at that level, is shifting fundamentally, the way we relate to each other is shifting fundamentally, then in time, if this erotic revolution, which actually calls for consciousness revolution, because it's not that easy to fulfill it and all that. But if this goes on, then we will be able to live a life that we are meant to, not a life that we are trying to invent, project, or overlap to the reality as it is. And that is something amazing, because we have a lot of resources we're not able to tap in today because we are having this wrong attitude in life. And to give you an example, we don't have time. Time is a resource that we can't produce. We don't even having one producer of 1 second on the planet today. It's something we don't even know how to tap into. This is something I discovered many years ago. Time as a resource, we can harvest and we can even produce. Time is a resource in our life, but it depends on how we relate to life. You'll be surprised, but when you learn how to be erotic, you learn how to relate, including to time, in a different way.
Can you explain that a bit more?
I know, this is such a catching thing. Yes, I can explain that. Do you know this empiric observation that almost everyone can relate to about a pleasant state that is running so fast and a pain that is running so slow? In a difficult situation, seconds go like hours. And then when you do something super nice and super beautiful, it's just like that. It's a flip of a second. Yeah, we can all relate to that. Many years ago, I was wondering, what if this, because I grew up in a family of scientists and I am a scientist myself. And I was wondering, if this observation, empiric observation, is so generalized, could it be there is something objective to it? Could it be that our consciousness truly alter the time flow according to what state are we into? And the answer, after many experimentations and many cross-references, is yes. We truly alter even the time flow in our life. Moreover, there is an enormous amount of time resource in moments of unconsciousness. Now, erotic excitement is having as a byproduct an enhancement of our capacity to stay awake, to stay aware. Sexual excitement has exactly the opposite effect. Sexual excitement replaces awareness with instinct. So, as a result, the sexual experience runs very fast, while an erotic experience is like slow motion. It's literally like you are watching yourself in slow motion. Now, on the background of intense pleasure, erotic pleasure, you learn the fastest. With other words, that simple scheme of slowing down everything in your consciousness is learned in a very, very intense way while you are doing this erotic experience. And then you will notice something extraordinary. In few minutes, for you is passing subjectively few minutes, you do something which will cover hours. You gain time.
That's beautifully explained. Thank you so much, Advaitananda.
Of course, this is just a hint. It's long process of learning, but because you are asking, I just wanted to give you a hint in that.
So, final question. If anyone listening to this would like to know more about the erotic revolution and to start practicing erotic intimacy in their relationship, how should they start? And are they going to need a lot of courage and determination and discipline? What will they need?
I will start with that part. It's true, one needs the courage to face the unknown. Because I can tell you, without any doubt, it is an unknown. No matter how much, when you listen to these words, you might say, oh, I think I know something about it. Literally, when you enter the experience, it's like everything you knew before out through the window. But, so that courage to face the unknown, it's something, I don't know how to replace it with anything else. The courage to face the unknown. But, on the other hand, there are a lot of gains, a lot of rewards that are awaiting. So it's not a dry journey. Actually, it's quite intense and wet journey. But also, you see, one of the barriers that one need to be aware of is what I call the shock of difference. You see, the first thing that you do when you learn something new is to compare it with what you knew before. And today we have a very bad habit we've learned in the society, in our education today. We're very bad in taking feedback. We have a little bit of a problem to learn radically. And therefore we like to learn things that are similar to what we previously knew. And that's not happening. When you encounter this kind of erotic experience, you should be ready to see that what you've done previously was not exactly even in your advantage. So I'm saying this because sometimes people bounce back. They start to learn. The background voice is saying, what now? So what? You want to say that I've spent 15 years for nothing or what? And then they bounce off. I know, it is difficult. We've been all through that. But that's because it's a revolutionary perspective. But if you dare to try a little bit, then you sweeten a little bit this bitter moment of realizing the difference. You make it a little bit better, and then the results immediately appear. Prolonged orgasmic states, amazing happiness, very long experience, appetite. The appetite comes back, even for people who don't even want to take their clothes off anymore because, heck, come on, I know that. No, you don't. It's like suddenly you're like two horny teenagers, but interestingly, not in the same horniness, I don't even know if it's an English word, but I hope it's understandable, as the teenagers were, as you were as a teenager. Something totally different. And so that's why, if you start like that, and you start with experimentation, the journey is very beautiful. And every steps call for the next one and the next one. It's like a journey that fascinates. It's not a dry journey through the desert to somewhere you know that it will be the oasis and it will be nice. No, actually it's quite rewarding from the very beginning, and it's very interesting. I recommend to start with these courses that we have already on Tantra, for instance. In the Tantra course, you learn extensively. Also, we have the lectures from my teacher, the lectures of Grigorian Bivolar, that are super comprehensive for beginners. So everything a beginner needs to know to get started, even recommendations, and the set of consciousness, so to speak, what you need to relearn there, everything gradually is exposed there. And those who want to teach further other people, soon there will be an erotologist course, where they can start to learn. But important is to start the journey and spread the word. I know it is a little bit known today, or almost unknown today, but considering the topic, I think it will spread.
Advaitananda Stoian, thank you so much.
Thank you too very much for listening and to asking all these elements.
You're very welcome.